today, what we're going to be doing is replacing the battery in an iPhone 6 Plus. Okay, first of all, you definitely want to make sure that you order a non-generic, original iPhone battery, and you need battery adhesives, double-sided tape like this. Make sure you have tools that can do this. They have the different tips, and also make sure you have one that has plastic spudgers, because you do not want to use metal while prying on the screen, because metal can obviously break the screen, break the glass. Make sure you're prepared and you know what you're doing. The actual hardest part of this repair video for me was getting the OtterBox off. Once you get the OtterBox, well, if you don't have an OtterBox, use the pentalobe screwdriver. There'll be 2 pentalobe screws at the bottom of the iPhone. Put them in a place that you will not lose them. Be sure of this. Next, you get the spudgers. And what you're going to do is kind of pry on the screen glass a little bit. What I have to do here is get another little like spudger pick, and I put it to hold the glass up on the screen on the phone. It kind of looks like a guitar pick, but it's not. I just put it like, wedge it inside the phone, inside the screen glass here. As you can see, it wedges it up just enough to fit in there. And I take this spudger and I go around the screen to pry it up. Go around one side, then I take it around the other side. Just take it around, easy and gently. You don't have to be too rough. I struggle for a second here, but then I just go around and I open it up. And once you do that, you simply just lift the screen up. And then what you'll need a Phillips, a small Phillips. There's the battery, of course, right there. That's what needs to come out. There is tape underneath of it. The very first thing you want to do is you want to unhook the battery, because you do not want to take a risk of, while you're working on the phone, for it to receive a shock from the battery that's in it. So once you disconnect the battery, the battery is not going to shock or provide electricity, anything that it can damage. Right here, there are 2 screws under or on top of the battery connector. Take these 2 screws out with a Phillips screwdriver, and remember to put them where you know you're not going to lose them. Then you lift up the cover plate for the battery connector. I'm just using a plastic spudger here. You can use tweezers if you have those. And then there is the battery connector. It just kind of pops up and out, and then it's disconnected from the phone. Now there's no risk of damage in the phone. So now you can move on up to the next step, and that is the heat shield that holds the flex cables in place. The cables that connect the screen and the touch sensor, the headphone, everything, all that, and the front camera in place. It's all under this heat shield right here. You just unscrew these screws, and remember, they're a little different in length, so you might want to put them in the order that they came out, an order that you can recognize. And also, you do not want to lose these. And once you get them all out, that shield comes right up. and then it will expose the flex cables, the cables that's plugged into the logic board of the phone. So what you want to do is just take a plastic spudger, and you can gently do this. You don't have to be too gentle, but don't rough house it. They just pry right up just like that, and you just pry them all up gently until they all come back. And you just keep prying. And then once they're all pried, that right there is the heat shield right there. And once they're all pried out, then you can remove the screen. It's totally off. Now, this next step is what we're going to have to do is to get that battery out of there. First, I think I'll take a drink of some Sunkist here. Alright, now to the phone. You see, there's on some of the phones you can just pull this tape adhesive up. This one has been in for a long time and it won't let me do that, so I'm going to have to take this out the hard way. I'm just going to go slowly but surely. I'm just going to take it easy, and I'm just going to pry the adhesive to the battery up. You do not want to do this with metal. I'll tell you why. Because if you puncture the battery, especially with metal, it can actually catch fire because it is a lithium polymer battery. You see, I'm kind of prying the battery slowly, and you have to have patience with this. Prying it up. It's almost out of there. And then here it comes. Here comes the battery. And then it's off there. And like I said, you'll want to replace it with a genuine Apple battery, because if you get a third-party knockoff, it may not work right with your Apple phone, or it may not recognize, like when you go into your battery performance under your settings, it may not tell you how many hours is left. It may not give you any information on the battery, and the battery might die slowly if it's a generic third-party battery. So that's why I always get brand name Apple parts. Then before you put the battery in, if there's any adhesive tape, double-sided tape like there is here, you'll want to remove it. Make sure you have no tape in there at all. Again, these batteries usually last a good, depending on how much you drop a phone, or it's in the heat or the extreme cold, they usually last about 4 to 5 years. And they just keep getting weaker after that. So, this battery here has been like 4.5 years old. So what I'm doing here is, I've ordered a new one, which I can give you a link in the comment box below, where you can order a new genuine Apple battery. And that's what I'm explaining, is that you need to buy a genuine Apple battery, not a third-party knockoff. And they're still cheap. You can, as of April 2019, you can get a genuine battery for an Apple 6 Plus for around $8. So they're not all that expensive anyway. So I'm going to open this up, peel the plastic off of this, take out the battery, and then I'm going to get the double-sided tape, because once I put this back in, that's what's going to hold the battery in place, is the double-sided tape, just like the tape that I took off of it before. Again, this job here is very, very easy. The parts don't cost very much. The double-sided tape, I think, costs like $1.50 shipped to you. So the whole thing is like like $9.50. And you know, these repair shops, you know, charge you quite a bit. Again, you know, it's not rocket science. You know, if you're just careful and you have a little bit of faith in yourself, this is a do-it-yourself project. You don't have to work for NASA or be a rocket scientist. You can actually do this. Now you want to put this double-sided tape. Just be careful with it, and you want to put it on the back of the battery. Now I think here I could have done the tape a little better, but you know, I got it good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect, because it just has to be good enough for the battery to stick inside the case. Now the old battery on this phone was barely even lasting like 5 to 10 minutes, so it definitely needed the battery change. And after this, you know, it should last hours. You know, I think the 6 Plus last, I don't know, it's like 8 hours or something like that. Well, anyways, make sure when you're lining it up, after you have the double-sided adhesive tape on there, you line it up exactly kind of where the old battery was. Don't set this over top any wires or anything like that. Make sure everything is cleared out of there. And then you kind of barely press down. And I want to make sure that there's no tape sticking out, that those little tabs to the tape is all lined up if I ever need to take a battery out again. And then I kind of smooth and put a little bit of pressure with your fingers to smooth out that battery so that it can come in contact with the tape below, and it kind of affixes itself to the case. See there? It's not going to fall out. It is installed into the case now. Now I'm going to get this little bit of plastic out of my way, and I'm going to start hooking the screen back up. Now remember, these will only plug back in, the flex cables will only plug back in one way. It's kind of like a puzzle. You can't plug the wrong cord in to the wrong port. It just barely kind of snaps in, and you can kind of feel it kind of snap in. If you don't feel that little tiny snap, then it's not in there very good. You throw this little piece of plastic out of the way, and once they're snapped in, you put the heat shield right back over the flex cables. And you remember where those screws are that you had. So I'm going to use a tweezers here to get it right over on top of the heat shield. And it's important that you get the right screws in there, because the longest screw is farthest to the right, and the smallest screw is right here on the left. It's the first screw. They're different in length, and you want to pay attention. You want to make sure you put all these screws back in here. This is one of the components that keeps the phone from overheating. A lot of people usually put these back together without these parts, and they'll tell you it's okay. And in a lot of situations it is, but you know, they can be more apt to overheat. So I always want to put it back exactly the way Apple intended it to be. Here's the second big screw. I'm putting that back in there. Oh, and I'm using a magnetic screwdriver. That will help, by the way. It doesn't hurt at all. There's the middle screw. And there's two bottom ones. Get this metal one on here, or middle one. Sometimes it's hard working with a screwdriver, because you got to get it just kind of right, get it started on there. Sometimes it's hard to get the right leverage. Then, see, get the last or no, second to the last screw, I think. The screw's on the bottom here. And again, like I'm saying, have a little bit of faith in yourself. This is a do-it-yourself project, really. You don't have to be like a NASA scientist or anything like that, or an astronaut. If you can put a puzzle together, you can do this. Just remember, one of the most important things is disconnecting that battery first. That way you're not going to shock any kind of metal onto the logic board or the main board, motherboard. It's the same thing. I'm just using different names for it. Okay, I'm putting the last screw into that plate there. There's 5 screws total. Remember, in the 6 Plus, there's 5 screws in that top heat shield. Now, you may have to crimp. Some batteries are already made like for the crimp to plug into the logic board, and some of them aren't. This one wasn't already made that way, so I bend it just a little bit. You got to be careful not to hurt that little flex cable, but I bend it and so that it plugs into the main board, the logic board on the cell phone. And then once that is bent, I have help here. I have my son hold the display for a second while I bend it properly, and then I plug it in. So if you have help, that's great. If not, you can do it by yourself. And you'll feel it kind of snap in right there when it snaps in just right. But see, I wanted that flex cable has to be flush and go right beside the battery instead of over top of it, so that the screen is able to close inside the case. And then you have the metal shield that goes over the battery plug, where the battery plugs into the logic board. And there's 2 screws here, and the bigger screw actually goes to the right, and the smaller one goes toward the inside here. The one I'm trying to screw in now, that's where the bigger screw goes, if you get confused. Now once these are back together, you basically, there is a groove on top of the screen that you push down and then up, and then you take your fingers and then you pop the screen back into place on each side of the case. I'll show you how to do that in just a second. And then once that is done, see, I'm doing it now, you put here's the little flap that you make sure it goes underneath, and you put the screen back on there. Then you put the 2 pentalobe screws back in with the pentalobe screwdriver, and then you plug it in with your charger. Make sure you find your charger, and it may take 5 minutes for the phone to come on, but you are done at this point. Give yourself a pat on the back.